Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. Today, I am here with Dana Dorfman. Dana, I didn't even ask you, Dana or Dana?
It's Dana, but it's spelled
Dana.
like Dana, and I answer to Dana
That's good.
or
All
Dana.
right. So let me start again. Today, I'm here with Dana Dorfman, psychologist and author of When Worry Works, How to Harness Your Parenting Stress and Guide Your Teen to Success. First of all, who doesn't want to do that, right? We all want to do that.
That's what we're all trying to do.
Yep. Do you have a copy of your book so you could share it? Show it.
Oh, yes, I do.
Oh,
I
there
have
it
it
is.
right here.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like
So,
my
and I have
backdrop.
a copy, but it's uncorrected page proofs. But
Yes.
I read the book. It's really good. I highly recommend it. I especially loved the stories. Like you take scenarios of people you're seeing in your office, and you inform us as if we're having the therapy with you, which I love. Thank you so much. So my takeaway: there's 8 different parenting styles. Like, I don't think you use those words. What do you call them?
I call them parts, parent anxiety reaction types.
Okay.
Parts.
So when I started reading it, I thought, well, which one am I? But then unfortunately, or fortunately, I thought, well, which one aren't I? Anyway, so I wanted to bring up the scenarios in the way that I read them and ask you for similar advice that you gave in the book. Not so much that people still aren't desperate to go out and read it, because it's really worth reading. But, I don't know if this, I know that from your teen's perspective, we hear this a lot from parents, but when there's kind of a mismatch in temperament, especially when it's introvert and extrovert, and if the mom is the extrovert, which was the story for one of my kids in my house. So how does that go awry, and how do we remedy that?
So it's, I probably say it's hard to say, but I think that even you're knowing, or even a parent knowing that it is a temperament issue, is sort of a helpful way to objectify or add more objectivity to your understanding of your teen, your child, because this way we're viewing our children from a standpoint of, this is not them being difficult, or they are not wrong, or this is not a bad way to be in the world. This is just different from the way that I exist, as opposed to I need to make them the right way. So I think that the fact that you've even kind of positioned it as if like, this is a different way of existing in the world, but it is a perfectly acceptable way. I don't always understand it, and it's very different from mine, but it is an acceptable way, already sort of helps you to not personalize it, and to even kind of release your anxiety. You may still have anxiety about it, but it's more objective. I don't know if that resonates.
Yeah, so I want to say that I wish I hadn't phrased it that way, because I was the parent who didn't know that you didn't teach a kid to be the way I was.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of gave it to you in this sanitized way. What if I don't think I'm alone in this. What if you think that, like, the way we value social life so much, and an introvert might be retreating when you would have run in.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we kind of wrap our heads around the fact that they're just living in the world differently, and like, you might not recognize it. You might think that it's your job as a parent to teach them.
Yes. And actually, and I think that I also see many parents and work with many parents and kids who have this very dilemma. And some of the time it's a huge relief, actually, I think, for parents to at least consider, when they are very bothered by a behavior or a way of being or a pattern of behavior that their kid is demonstrating, if there is a way to say, might this be like a way of existing in the world, or might this be attributable to temperament, or might it be that from my perspective, I view the world through my lenses and my perspectives, and might there be somebody who I also admire or like, who has a similar way of being, that I also respect. Like, I think even as far as the introvert is concerned, and there was I don't know if you've ever read that book, Quiet, which is a wonderful book by Susan Cain. And I think that there are people who I admire. Actually, I am extroverted for the most part too, and I oftentimes admire people who don't feel compelled to get in their 2 cents at a meeting, or who are sort of quietly sitting back, or maybe even, to me, they seem mysterious, and I feel like, they're not wearing their heart on their sleeve the way that I do. So if there is a way to almost recognize what this pattern of behaviors are, that the pattern is, and then if you can see it in somebody else, I think can be very helpful. And I think that knowing for ourselves all the time that this is from where we come. So when we come from somewhere and someone else is hard to understand, that they are not necessarily wrong, that we are seeing them through our lens, which is unfortunately fortunately or unfortunately subjective. So I think even just taking that step back can be helpful.
I love your idea. I've never heard anyone say it, so that always gets me really excited. That think about someone who's like your kid that you love and admire, because it takes, I don't know, I think it would transform the whole relationship to separate it from like what you expected your kid to be like, and instead neutralize it. Like, I think if we could do that all the time, it would be so amazing. Really, really great.
Yes. And if you think about it too, a lot of times when we have very negative responses, especially to our kids, it's because we are seeing attributes or qualities in them that either we don't like about ourselves or that we don't like in somebody else. I see tons of people who complain, like, when their child acts in a way that is reminiscent of a sibling or a parent or something, or a spouse, that they want to eradicate it immediately because it's also something that they don't like in somebody else. But if there is a way to kind of position it, in a more admiring way, we're also recognizing or giving a nod to, there are different ways to exist in the world. Not everybody, we wouldn't want a world of extroverts. Like, it wouldn't work well.
Yeah, no, that's great. Brilliant. Okay. So, again, I think you touched a real deep chord in me. Like, when we feel our kids' pain as if it's our own pain, where our whole body is reacting like it's happening to us. So why is that bad? Well, forget like how bad it is for ourselves, that, we could make ourselves sick over someone else's pain, but also what does that do for our kids?
Well, first of all, we almost can't forget what it does to us, because I think that that's part of the issue, is that it's oftentimes the feelings that get engendered in us, or by virtue of watching our child go through something that then touches such a deep part of us because it is a pain point or something. The more that we can learn to tolerate kind of our own feelings, the better equipped we are to also convey to our kids. I'm making this sound much easier than it actually is. I mean, I can act like a big shot in my office, but with my own kids, this is the hardest part of parenting, I think, is tolerating that feeling within ourselves, because we're modeling, first of all, for our kids that we know the feeling or our version of the feeling, and we can handle it. So it's not like feelings consume us and derail us to such an extent, but like, this is part of being a human being, is that you experience sort of this range of feelings. And also it allows us to offer some room to our teenagers, especially, to sort of contain the feeling that, because they are adolescent and because their limbic systems and their brains are not as developed, ideally, as ours are, then we have a better capacity to regulate our emotions. So some of the time they truly are consumed by the emotion. It's sort of like, the first heartbreak is absolutely the most painful one, or the way that teenagers can feel is so, it's like a raw nerve. It really, they feel things as acutely as that. And so by our being able to say also, like, I'm going to contain that for you because you're unable to in this moment. So I'm going to sort of share the feeling with you. But once you take it over for them or feel it on their behalf, there's a difference between sort of empathizing and merging, and so I think that, and I haven't quite like delineated the two for myself moment to moment, but I think that if we can think about it, just naming the feeling for ourselves, being able to contain the feelings for ourselves, tolerating the feelings for ourselves, we can also model it for our teens, which didn't actually answer your question, which is, if we are feeling it so strongly and it is so intolerable for us, it's also conveying to the teen or your kid, like, I can't handle your feelings. They are overpowering to me. Therefore, you better keep them closer to the vest or redirect them, because it's going to injure me. And on some level, the latent message is, and then I will be incapable of taking care of you. If I'm so bereft, then I'm not going to be available to you. So there is like a self-preserving factor that kids are sort of tuned into, consciously or more unconsciously probably, of like, I have to make sure that my parent is okay because I need them still.
Wow. So I could always do better when someone told me that I was causing damage to my kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I took it as something about me, that was harder. But if
Mm-hmm.
you tell me that overreacting or reacting at the same level as my kid might make them worry about me,
Mm-hmm.
that to me would put me in a whole different spot. I'm not as tested now because they're out of the house, but I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
see if there's an experience where I can say I have to react differently because I don't want them to worry about me.
Yes. Yes. And I think that does not mean denying your own feelings or pretending that you're not feeling them. In fact, you can even say, I was just talking to a friend yesterday, and who was really her young adult was going through a terribly painful social situation. And my friend was like dying inside and kept saying, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. And we had kind of, after processing it, she's a therapist too, so of course we'd like dig right in. She eventually said, like, I feel kind of helpless right now too. Like I feel powerless right now too. I'm here with you. But even naming the feeling also kind of models like, and I can handle this feeling, or there is a name for this feeling, as opposed to feeling like you need to come in to the rescue um, or fix it.
Okay. All right. On to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so values aligned decision making. So that one, the example that I could think of in my house was, I kind of hate football. And there's so much
Uh-huh.
evidence out there that we should all kind of hate football. Except I had a kid who football was kind of his religion.
Huh.
And so I couldn't. I just knew that I couldn't take it away. But so
Mm-hmm.
many stories, and that wasn't because of good parenting. That was because of a kid who was never going to back down.
Mm-hmm.
But for some parents, it's really a problem, right? Like to let their kid move in the direction the kid wants to go, when it butts up against what we would call values.
Yes, and so your dislike of football is a values-based thing. It's not that you just don't like, I don't know, that you don't like this. It's about sort of the values that it conveys. Is that?
Well, the yeah, the fighting of it, like
Uh-huh.
the kind of
Aggression.
aggression of it, right?
Uh-huh. Yes. And so I think that I think it's always helpful in those situations to be in touch with what your value is and to articulate it, so that you can even say, because I'll finish my thought, so that you can even say to your teenager, what concerns me about this is that I really value health and safety. And when I watch football, it seems like it is very dangerous, and could potentially harm your brain. And so that is what my objection is. And so, or that is what concerns me, so that then you can have a more constructive conversation. Because if you're just saying, no, I won't, which isn't what you did, but if you were to have said, like, no, I won't let you do this, what gets conveyed to the kid, or what the kid potentially interprets, is she doesn't want me to be happy. She doesn't understand me. She doesn't like what I like. She's a girl and doesn't get it. Girls don't understand. There are all different ways to interpret it. This way, you're very, very clear about, this is what I value, and this is what I'm trying to convey to you. And it could very well be, then you can more constructively problem solve. Then he could even say, like, okay, Mom, I appreciate that you care about my brain and about my health. Like, how about if, I wear extra padding, if you're allowed to do such a thing, or that there's some other kind of, or if I should get really injured, like, I assure you that I'm going to, like, take proper care of myself to make sure that I recover well. Or, not that any teenager is going to speak that way, but but you can more constructively problem solve, and you're being more clear about what it is that you want for him. Because it sounds like also in this situation, what you wanted for him was for him to be able to be who he was, and to be able to do something that he liked, and to express himself. I'm putting words in your mouth, but like, and it could very well be that he had aggression that he needed to get out. And if that were the case, you could also say, if that's what you're getting out of football, is there some other way? Can you also do drumming? Or, but it really calls a spade, as opposed to, like, sort of getting convoluted or lost in translation in our conversations. The more clear we are about what it is that we value, and using that as, like, the why, the why, and also kind of the North Star of our parenting. I think the more clear we are with our kids, and the more understood we are by our kids, I think.
Okay, this is an offshoot of that. So, like, I was just listening to someone's podcast, and it was a grown man, but his parents had said to him, no kid of ours is going to be a poet, like something like that. Mm-hmm. So does that model work for it? Who gets
Poets?
To decide? Yeah,
right. Poets and football players.
Well, in other, take it to other scenarios, right? Where it might not be your thing, and you might think, why do these parents care? But you have something that you care about also, mm-hmm. that you bring into the story, and then they turn into their own people. How does that happen when you want to control the decision making?
I had a conversation the other day with a father who is extremely liberal and a kind of almost like anti-capitalist. And he said to me, you know how I would feel like a failure if I were, as a dad, if my kid were to become an investment banker. To me, that would feel like I failed as a parent. And so we were kind of batting around the idea, what if this kid, though, was very invested in the economy and found it really interesting and stimulating? Like, who are you to say sort of what it is that they should be interested in? On the other hand, there are many artistic kids whose parents say, I'm not paying for you to go to art school, or, poetry is not, poets don't make a living, or something like that. And if there is a way to say, look, this is what's important to me, that you grow up to be financially independent, and also if this is your value, and that you are doing something that you feel good doing. And so is there a way that we can kind of make those things happen? Or because I think the more that a parent just sort of imposes without explanation, or does not take the kid's self into consideration, even though the parent's intention is good, it ends up just like inhibiting either the child, or it inhibits the relationship. And that isn't, it never ends well. I mean,
yeah. So the response to both of those examples is the same thing.
Yes,
Like
yes.
get to the core of what's worrying you and then have that conversation.
It's both get to the core of what it is that you value, like sort of identify those things that are the core fundamental things that are most important to you. And certainly if you saw a list of values, I'm sure that you would say 90% of them are important to me. But typically there are a few things that really sort of like touch us to our core and that we want to live our lives by. So if you can identify your values and also identify your anxieties, you're going to be able to make a more clear decision, or you're going to be able to express it more clearly to your teenagers so that they feel understood also. So yes, it does apply to poets, football players, ballet dancers, you name it, AP classes.
Even capitalists.
Yes, even capitalists. It was just such an ironic. I mean, I'm in the middle of Midtown Manhattan where I see tons of bankers, and it was just such a funny kind of, an understandable kind of comment, but it was just funny.
Yeah,
ironic.
Okay, here's my last question. So our kids are struggling, and we know how to solve the problem. In fact, we know how to solve it better than they could, because we've lived a lot more years, right, than our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And if we didn't know how to solve it better, what were we doing with all those years?
Mm-hmm.
Why shouldn't we jump in and help fix the problem?
We essentially are depriving our kids to be able to like develop ways to solve their own problems, or to figure out ways to solve problems, or to figure out, I think about it a lot in terms of walking. I think this may have been in my book, or it got edited out. I'm not sure, but
it's in.
It did get it. You think I did read the book, I promise. But if we think about like teaching or watching our kids learn to walk, it is so tempting to go in and, if they're about to fall, to pick them back up, and we can't move their legs for them. They need to figure out a way to be able to get their bodies, their own little bodies, their own little like developmental systems and things like that, to be able to work. See, there's somebody going to rescue someone else. Can you hear that?
Yeah, but that's their job.
Yes, exactly. And it's not a mother and a teenager. But so it is also a way, and that doesn't mean throw them to the wolves or throw them into the deep end and say like, well, I'm the parent and you need to learn to swim on your own. But that there are many ways to begin to help your kid begin to strengthen certain kinds of muscles and exercise them. It's figuring out kind of like how much. It's a lot like weightlifting or stretching your muscles or anything like that. You want to do enough that the muscles are challenged, or that the kid is challenged, but not so much that they're overtaxed and therefore unable to do what it is that they want to do. So like to incrementally kind of give kids the opportunity to develop and strengthen certain kinds of skills and muscles are what are going to allow them to endure or go like the distance, so to speak. So, but it is very, very hard to do. And it's very hard to watch them in their own problem solving methods to fumble around. It can be quite painful to watch. I don't even like my dog to struggle. Like, I was realizing the dog couldn't get off the bed, and I was just like, oh, I don't want her to feel frustrated. So it is really hard to watch someone that we know struggle. And that doesn't mean that we should allow them to struggle extensively, but certainly to challenge themselves.
We don't have to let them fail, but we can give them a long runway.
Yes, I think so. And I think the fear of failing is really sort of what prevents us from being able to take these incremental steps. It's not an all or nothing kind of thing, like either hands off the wheel or like gripping on tightly.
Okay, Karen has a question. So she was asking her son about choosing his elective classes for next year. It's his junior year. He wants easy classes. I asked him to look into other options. He said he'd ask his friends what they were taking, my son is choosing social opportunities over figuring out what he wants to explore, what skills or passions he's interested in. So I think the question here is, should she step back and let him do that, or is it important for her to jump in?
I think that this is a perfect example of like the over gripping or the hands off. I wonder if there would be value to saying to your son, even Karen, is that her name, Karen?
Mhm.
Yeah, Karen. If Karen, if you can say to your son, even like, this is what's important to me, is that you're able to find things that really interest you and that excite you. And so I want for you to be able to be exposed to things like that in order to be able to like figure out kind of, to have whatever, to have an enjoyable, interesting, curious experience. I also know that it's very important to you to be with your friends or to be like your friends. And so I respect both. I wonder if there is a way to sort of meet both of those needs so that you're not saying, like the truth is that friends ought to be important. And from an evolutionary and biological and physiological and developmental and neurological standpoint, friends are very, very important. And so it may be, and it is also important that a kid is beginning to have the experiences of seeing what excites them, interests them, makes them curious, things like that. And by virtue of like having broader exposure to things, the more opportunities you have to sort of see what you like. So there might be some kind of, it isn't necessarily a compromise as much as sort of, is there a way for me to instill my values and for you to hear those values and integrate them into a decision that makes sense? It could very well be that he only takes he tries one thing that he hadn't tried before, or, that there are many. So it's not an either or, it's sort of integrating them in and showing respect for what it is that is important to the teenager, because that is important to them. We don't want to poo-poo what's important to them.
Okay, well, I'm sure everyone watching feels this way. It would be really nice to have you living in our homes with us. You have
I don't know if my kids would say that.
Karen says thank you to you.
Thank you.
And Dana Dorfman, thank you so much for being here with us. Really solid advice, so helpful, such a gentle perspective. And it's so easy to get caught up in the all or nothing, and you repeatedly did this, like not all, not nothing. So thank you so much for being here with us, and we appreciate you giving us this great advice. And hold up your book. There's your book in the background.
This is my book on Worry Works, and I think that, and I have learned that it is even helpful to parents who are, this sounds like such a sales pitch, but it's not, but like for even parents of young adults and even parents of younger children too. It's just sort of like an overall parenting mentality that I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, it's gentle and kind. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.